Sinners sucks, actually. I do not know why so many people seem to think that it is so great, and my only guess is that it's a horror movie, and people have no standards anymore for horror movies. I probably wasn't going to see this movie, in fact, if I hadn't seen that both audience and critic scores were so high. Because I will dismiss either of those if the other score is bad. Because sometimes critics are wrong, sometimes they're right, sometimes audiences are wrong, sometimes they're right. They both have their own different weird biases. So, if it's just one or the other, I don't put a lot of stock in it. But when both agree on something, I tend to pay attention. So I decided to give this one a whirl anyway, and wow, was I disappointed. In fairness, and I have to be fair about this, is that I did something fairly unwise, and I did a double feature. And so before I saw Sinners, like in 10 minutes before, I had just gotten done watching The Amateur, which is also not very good. Though in a different, less interesting way, which is why I'm not ranting about it, because frankly, it's bad in very, very boring ways. But because I had just seen a different bad movie, I probably had less patience for Sinners. There are things that I am 100% confident about discussing about why it's terrible, and we'll get into those. But I want to give my first questionable critique. I think it's my only questionable critique out of the way, and that is of the pacing of the movie. Again, it might have just been that I was impatient, but it felt like this movie took forever to get started. I'm probably wrong, because it felt like an hour before the actual plot started, but then it felt even longer than an hour for the actual plot to go through. So I suspect that it isn't that setup sequence isn't as long as it felt like. I suspect that is some distortion of perception. However, even having said that, there is a long time before this movie gets going. However long it is. Maybe it's only a half hour, but it's at least a half hour here, where the Smokestack twins, I can speak, come back into town and are setting up or getting ready to set up the juke joint, which for some reason they have to open tonight. I don't know why this movie decided that it has to be like on a 1-day time scale, like everything has to happen within 24 hours. It really doesn't. It doesn't change anything about the plot. There's no ticking clock element, at least for setting up the juke joint. Like once it's evening and the vampires show up, sure, the sunrise is the ticking clock element. But let's say the twins got back into town and it was a week before the grand opening. Nothing changes about the movie. So it's a very minor thing, but it's one of those, I would say, careless details where it's like, no, they have to arrive into town and then immediately in a single night have their grand opening for no reason. Okay, you didn't need to do that. It makes your film slightly worse because you've put in this pointless absurdity. It's better to have less absurdities in your film. Is it that big of a deal? No, but as I'm going to contend, this script is incredibly careless. It fails repeatedly to integrate any of its ideas. Even the good ones are useless to the overall script. But back to the pacing. So they show up in town, and we have to go through like every single character that is going to show up later. And controversial take here, despite the characters being written very well, you might as well have not bothered, because they will not leverage the characterization. When the plot starts, this characterization might as well not be present. Like, credit where credit is due. The characters are good in the beginning of the movie. They take the time to really flesh out everyone, I thought. I felt like everyone was real people. I felt like everyone was interesting. And then when the actual plot happens, it doesn't matter. So, which I'm getting off track again because that'll come up a little bit later. But like, the twins are interesting characters. You know, they're World War I veterans that went up to become gangsters in Chicago and kind of played two sides against each other. Have effectively stolen cash and booze and are coming back down to their hometown to start this juke joint. Fascinating. I would have much preferred like a mini series about the Smokestack twins. Cut out all the vampire shit and let's just hear about their business dealings and stuff. That would be fine. We've got the characters to support it, I think. Preacher Boy, who's kind of our main character, the movie's kind of framed as if he should be the main character, but then the Smokestack twins kind of overshadow him in everything to the point of getting the final kill on the vampire. They basically steal it from him. And so it's kind of like, why did you bother framing so much of the movie around Preacher Boy? He's probably less developed than some of the other characters, but again, he's not super thin on characterization either. And he's likable. Very talented performances from the guy playing him. Really good music, which is another compliment that I'll give to this movie, is the music is fantastic. You can't take that away from it. So those are my 2 points of praise for the movie, is great characters and great music. And that's probably part of what is contributing to the high ratings here. Because again, there's a lot of crap, just plain crap in horror movies out there. Like not too long ago, I went and saw The Wolfman, and that started out with like, okay, this is pretty like slap you in the face, obvious characterization at the beginning, but okay, there's characters here. And the longer it went on, the less the characters mattered. And like the more it was just being drained away. It was like a soul-sucking experience watching that movie, because it was like they stopped trying to write anything as the movie went on. Absolutely garbage tier. Whereas in this movie, again, we had well-drawn characters, and unfortunately they also won't matter once the actual plot gets going. But as I said, this first like half hour, however long it was, I don't trust my sense of time, but however long it was, it's like, let's meet this character, and then let's meet this character, and let's meet this character, all with the framing device of we're getting the juke joint up and running. And here's the problem, the reason I say it's such bad pacing. There is no dramatic tension whatsoever here. We do not yet realize that we are in a horror movie. It's very obvious in retrospect why they open up this movie with, there's kind of 2 prologues to the movie. The first one is narration that basically says, in every culture, there is someone who can channel the music, and when they do so, when they get into the groove, man, they'll see the past and the future, but also like evil is attracted to the music because, and don't expect any elaboration on that because the movie doesn't care. That's intro 1, and then intro 2 is Preacher Boy after the events, of the night, walking up to his father, the preacher's, very small. It's basically like a shack, the church, because it's a very poor community. So that's why it is the way it is, obviously. But he comes in and he's like, he looks terrible. He's got scratches across his face. He's all bloodied up. He's only got the neck of the guitar because the rest of it's been broken. And everyone's shocked when he comes in, but his dad's like, no, come forward, son. Repent of your sinning ways. Let go of the guitar. Let go of the guitar. And they're like making it this big dramatic moment. And I suspect the reason that they did that, well, I'm not entirely sure. We're going to touch on this several times because I'm not entirely sure what the point of this scene was. But part of the reason that I think they put it there was because nothing will happen for a very long time. So they had to have this flash forward to let you know, like, oh, don't worry, there will be plot in this movie. Trust us, there will be plot. Just because we're going to have a half hour of no dramatic tension does not mean please don't leave the theater. Please keep watching the movie. So even though the characters are well developed as we meet each and every one of them, there's not really any drama. Like, some scenes will have drama in the sense that the characters will have drama with each other, but that's not quite the same as like overall dramatic tension, because there's not a big dramatic question that's hanging over most of these scenes. So, for example, because I'm going to reference it later, The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing. Great movie. Is it unfair to compare this movie to it? I mean, it's unfair to compare most movies to The Thing because it's so great, but I don't care. That's called a standard. Try having some. In the beginning of The Thing, we don't know what's going on. We see the Norwegian? Is it the Norwegian group? Yeah, I think it's Norwegians that are hunting down the dog as the dog comes in here. And so that doesn't tell us much, but it immediately establishes a question that's hanging over everything. What happened to the Norwegians? What's up with this dog? And then we'll get, the scenes where the dog is going through the base and our team goes to the Norwegian camp to see what's going on. All of that helps to develop this dramatic question of what happened. And it keeps us interested. There are like a couple of moments that are just pure character setup, like it's MacReady, right? Our main character in The Thing, MacReady playing chess with the computer. That's like 30 seconds though, just to be clear. So it's like you don't need every scene to be directly relevant to the dramatic question, but the overall direction of the movie should be. You get a little bit of leeway when you're introducing things in the first act, but you should move towards it pretty quick. And this movie, Sinners, does not. For most of the beginning, it's like the main thrust of it is Smoke and Stack setting up the juke joint. But that's not dramatic because there's no stakes. They've arrived into town, they have money, they've gotten the property, they just need to bring people together. And it's like, okay, so what's the drama? What's the stakes? Well, what if they don't? Then they move their opening night to another night. That's what I mean. There's no drama, there's no dramatic stakes, there is no tension, minor or major, throughout it. And even when we have, like, I totally blanked on most of these characters' names, but the white woman that comes up to Stack that they have a past relationship with, and you're like, oh, that's drama, right? There's some sort of drama there because he's trying to get her to get gone. And it's like, sure, technically that is, but that's only between those two characters, and that's like a single scene. It's not the overall dramatic thrust of the movie. So it's a subplot, is what it is. So you still have most of these scenes being, oh, are we going to do something now? And again, to that end, they do that terrible horror movie trope where no one's been scared in a while, so we have to have something randomly, and I use the heaviest air quotes possible here, scary happen. And in this case, it's when they're getting some supplies for the place. They've like stashed their truck in like I don't actually remember what kind of like plants it was. It was like a field with some tall plants, and so they go into it and they pull the tarp off of it, and there's a terribly CGI'd snake there, and it's like, oh no, a scary snake. It's that sudden reveal, and it hisses and loud noise in the theater. Ooh. And then they kill it, and that's the end. Is the snake relevant to anything? Is it like some agent of a vampire? No, it's just a scary snake. Remember, this is a horror movie, guys. We got to have a scary snake. Are you scared? Are you spooked? This is a good movie, by the way. pointless scene just to scare you. That's what we call good writing. We couldn't do things like slowly establish a mood and tension, start to develop an antagonist that'll be relevant later. No, a good movie has random scary snake, random scare. That's very intelligently written horror. Because one of the things that I want to remind everyone with my little ramble here is that's not an oxymoron. Good horror movies exist. It's real simple. You make a good movie and then you make it horror. That's all you need to do. They exist. I promise you, they exist. Please have standards. So I've rambled on probably enough about this intro because there's only so many times that I can say there is no dramatic tension. And I could go through all of the characters, which again are generally pretty good. Even the characters who technically don't have a lot of development because they only appear for a little bit, they're written in such a way that they feel genuine and real. And it starts off very grounded. And, again, credit to all of that where it's due. And it is due to the characters. But I'm not going to talk about them. And the reason that I'm not going to talk about them and go through all of the good ways that they're developed is because the movie doesn't leverage any of that. So let's get into that. The main plot of this movie is actually incredibly simple. We fast forward to the juke joint, and everyone is having a good time at the juke joint, and some vampires decide to crash the party, and they want, as vampires do, they want to go feed on the people inside. However, this movie operates on the rules for vampires where they have to be invited inside. So they aren't invited inside, and that's the rest of the movie. The vampires trying to get in, and the people trying to keep them out. You would think that this is a very rich setup for the vampires to prey upon the rich established characteristics of the people locked inside in order to manipulate them into wittingly or unwittingly inviting the vampires in so the bloody feast can begin. You would be wrong. All of the careful character setup is pointless to this movie, and that's why I'm not spending a lot of time on it, because this movie does something uniquely incompetent. You spent all of this effort creating rich characters, and I can honestly recommend cutting it. And if that sounds weird, let me explain. I think most stories, and movies in particular, given that they are relatively short, one way to evaluate them is for efficiency. And by efficiency, I mean that everything within them exists for a purpose. If you have an extraneous scene that does not somehow affect or contribute to the overall effect of the movie and the overall story, cut it. This is the basic reason, by the way, that we don't see people like driving from point A to point B. We see them get at, maybe not even this much, but we see them get in the car at point A and then get out of the car at point B at most. Because we don't need to see them driving. It's irrelevant. If you've got irrelevant stuff in your script, get rid of it. Normally, character stuff would be very relevant. But again, because this script doesn't leverage it in the main plot, weirdly I can say cut it and it will make this movie more efficient in terms of more things are more relevant. And that's absolutely baffling. The other suggestion that I would have would be stop trying to make a horror movie, cut out all the vampire stuff, find some sort of drama with this business and focus it on like a community drama instead. And that's probably the more promising thing because everything about the vampires is trash. So, again, it's hard to describe what isn't there, but there is no manipulation from these vampires. And so the character stuff is pointless. let me try to give an example of what I mean by efficiency, because I feel like some people are probably going to resist me on that point. And there's a lot of weird opinions about film out there. And one of the things that I hate most about any artistic community is people don't want to treat it like a science. I know that sounds weird. Bear with me. In my opinion, specifically, we'll stick to storytelling because I'm not like an artist in most other. I'm not like highly trained in other arts. Like I dabble in drawing and pressing a couple of keys on a keyboard, but that I don't consider myself to be a very well informed. What would you call it? Musician or still artist. That's not the right term, but I can't think of anything. I do movies and stories. Okay, so they exist for a purpose. Movies are applied psychology. What physics is to engineering, psychology is to storytelling. The point when you make a story, it's a science in the sense that you are trying to invoke an experience, some emotions and thoughts, and what I call an experience in the audience. And you are going to do so through the precise application of, the events of a story and how those events are depicted. That's what I mean when I say it's a science. But people tend to get really precious about art and trying to make it almost like a spiritual thing instead. Like, oh, you can't apply like rules to this thing. Nonsense. So, efficiency, let's talk about it. One example of efficiency, and that when I say you can cut something out and it doesn't affect the movie. And a good example of that, I'm going to use another very well-written movie, Back to the Future. Back to the Future has an incredible script, actually. It might not get enough credit for what it deserves. And there's a lot of elements that you might think like, oh, we can cut that. That doesn't add anything. And to a greater and lesser degree, these things are true. Not every element of a script or a story is as important as everything else. But every element should be there for at least one reason, preferably more than one reason. So let's take something seemingly minor from Back to the Future, and that is Marty can skateboard. Okay, this seems pretty irrelevant. Like, this is just a random character trait, right? Like, sure, it tells us a little bit about the character, but if I'm being consistent, you might ask, surely, if it's only there to tell us about the character, just like how The Sinner's first half hour or however long is only there to inform us about the characters to get us to like the characters, if that's the only reason that it exists, same thing with Marty and the fact that he skateboards, then surely you would agree that it can be cut just as much as all of that character stuff that you're flagrantly disregarding, Evan. And the answer is no, actually. The skateboarding, actually serves multiple purposes, whether you realize it or not. First of all, it's showing that he can get around town. Why is that important? It makes him a more independent character, so it helps him to explain sort of the fact that he has this crazy scientist as a friend. It would be weird if he was just being like dropped off by his folks at the crazy scientist's place. That would severely change the dynamic as well. But you say, okay, why don't just let him drive a car then? After all, he's a teenager. He knows how to drive. You can let him drive. Why does his vehicle have to be a skateboard? Why couldn't it be also like a bike? The bike answer is relatively simple. Skateboarding is cooler. Very simple. But why not a car? Why not the car? Well, if you remember rather carefully in the movie, there's a couple of things that have to do with cars. And I don't mean the DeLorean. I mean, actually, if you haven't seen Back to the Future in a long time, you might have forgotten this. But there's two important points about the car in 1985. The first is he doesn't have his own car. He has to borrow the family's car. That tells us a couple of things. First, that they're not like a super well-off family. And this is all going to matter for the very final scene after all of his adventures in the denouement. And you might also remember that the family car was totaled by Biff in 1985. Why does that matter? Because he can't take his girlfriend Jennifer out camping. These are all things that help to establish the fact that, frankly, his original 1985 life isn't all that great. These are all problems that he has. You will also notice, related to that same plot point, that in 1985A, he also sees like the fancy pickup truck that he wants. And he's like, oh, imagine if I had that kind of a thing. And in 1985B, after his adventures, the family actually has that. So again, it's showing how his intervention, it is a physical manifest way to show how his intervention in the past, however unwittingly, has improved everyone's lives, including his own. Also, the fact that he wants to take Jennifer out camping in the first place is not just a random, pointless insertion into the film. It exists to contrast how his relationship with Jennifer is compared to how his mother displayed or portrayed her own relationships in the past, namely that she tried to be like, oh, we were all like perfectly upright back in the 50s. Everything was clean and upright, and I don't like this idea of you taking a girl out camping and stuff. It's very, very naughty thoughts, Mr. McFly. And so it helps. Again, all these things are intertwined, and if you cut one of them, you have to start changing more and more and more. But so, okay, Marty can't be driving around in the family car if the family car is going to get wrecked and wreck his plans. But we're not done. There's more to reasons why skateboarding around is a thing that is important. And namely, that is because of the action scene, quote unquote, later when he is evading Biff on his makeshift skateboard there, which is not only a comedic beat, but it also leads to what? It leads to Biff wrecking his car. Why is that important? Well, because that's the whole reason that Biff then shows up outside of when Marty is parked with his mom, and Biff shows up. Why is he there? Because he's got such a big bill for his car, so he's going to beat the shit out of Marty. And which also leads to the very point where Marty's dad comes in and actually saves the day here. And which in turn is the reason why in the future we get the 1985 be in the first place. What I'm saying is this is one example of a very well-written script. You take one small element, Marty rides a skateboard, and you think that that is a trivial, useless thing. But if you try to cut it, suddenly you have to change about 15 other things in there. It can be done. You can create a version of the Back to the Future script without skateboarding. But you're going to have you're going to have to do a lot more work. In contrast, to go back to Sinners, if you cut the character work out, what do you need to change about let's call it the vampire standoff? And the short answer is not really anything. You need to know that a couple of people are married. You need to know that a couple of people have had a fling in the past. That's it. All of the rest of the character work, if you cut out that first bit, doesn't change a thing. And that brings me to another thing that it does not change. And that is music. Not that you should cut out the music in this movie, because again, it's some great music. But this movie seems to be under the misapprehension that it has something to say about music. It does not. And the reason I say it feels like it has something to say about music is because of that framing device at the beginning. Not only do we have both framing devices, by the way, not only do we have that intro narration that's like bigging up that there are Preacher Boy, that there are certain people who can channel the music for supernatural ends, I guess, but also when you frame you frame the story by having the first scene be Preacher Boy walk in with the broken guitar and his dad is like, put the guitar down, son. You're implying that there is going to be that to guitar or not to guitar is going to be one of the central tensions of the movie. It just isn't. They just do not develop this at all. What does this movie have to say about music? Well, I can tell you what music does in the movie, and then we can try and work backwards. This movie has a lot of music in it, a lot of really good blues music. Most of it is just people playing the music. Nothing really more to say about them, but people playing music very well. And that alone would just be fine. Like, you don't need an excuse to have good music. They're looking for musicians for the grand opening. Cool. That's all you need. But they've added more. They've added more significance. So what else does music do? Well, it attracts the vampires, apparently. Now you might ask, why? I don't know. I have no idea. For some reason, the vampires decide to show up at the juke joint because of Preacher Boy's playing. Somehow he plays so good that it attracts them. I wish that I could elaborate on that to explain why it doesn't work, but that's literally all there is to it. It is that simple. The vampires show up because he played so good. And the movie frames it a couple of times as if the vampires want Preacher Boy specifically. But again, because it's a poorly written film, they're not consistent on this point. The vampires will and do frequently feed off of whoever they can get their hands on and turn them into a vampire. Yeah, by the way, this movie is very much one of those where seemingly you only need to get bit by a vampire to turn into one, which it's fine, kind of. If you can have whatever vampire mythos you want, that's fine. One of the problems with the you just need to get bitten once to turn into a vampire mythos is that, oh my gosh, vampires are going to be a plague in that universe. And again, in that first half hour, they do a pretty thorough job of trying to establish that this is a pretty grounded world. They have, it's Smoke that says, like, he's never seen anything mystical in all of his crazy adventures, kind of a thing. And I like that, but then it begs the question, wait a minute, these vampires, who, by the way, make no effort to conceal themselves, these vampires who are a plague upon the land, they bite anyone, and that person becomes a vampire. Why don't people know vampires exist? Because they're not going to keep their cover very long if they spread that quickly. And again, they make no efforts to conceal themselves. But, okay. That's not the main point I want to get to. The main point I want to get to is that only when the script remembers will the vampires be like, you, Preacher Boy, I want you specifically. There's something about you. What is that something? Why do they want him? I don't know. Doesn't explain. They just do. Okay, so that's one thing that this movie has to say about music. Which isn't really saying anything. Vampires are attracted to music. Okay, so am I supposed to take that as music is a bad thing? Was his dad actually right? Should he put the guitar down? Is blues music of the devil for some reason? It attracts vampires, therefore it's bad. That's what this movie is saying, right? Well, not really. Because the other thing, I don't want to have to talk about this scene. I think it's the most cringe thing that I've seen in a very long time. And I have the sneaking suspicion that a lot of people actually like it. I don't know because I haven't read any of the reviews. I haven't followed the reception to this movie. I think the scene is awful. When they first open the juke joint, during opening night, and Preacher Boy is playing, there is a moment where, first off, because the movie thinks you're stupid, it repeats the narration from the beginning. That some people are so in tune with the music that they can reach back into the past or even see the future. Let the cringe begin. As we see this it's like an old sawmill that has been converted to this place. And when I say converted, I mean they haven't really done any work in this place because, again, it was a single night. So basically, it's like they got they got a very large wooden building out in the middle of nowhere, and that's the place. Like, and no judgment about that. I just need you to picture this in your mind, that it is just basically an old sawmill where these people are dancing and drinking and having a good time. And as the music gets a little bit faded, we're focusing on Preacher Boy here as he's playing away, again, really good. And then we pan a little bit to the side, and I'm not sure what era this guy is supposed to be from, but we see another guitarist, but with like an electric guitar. And then we hear him playing alongside with this blues music. And he doesn't look like, and when I say an electric guitar, I don't mean like a modern, he's not, I don't know what genre he's supposed to be representing, but it's clear, it seems clear to me that it's not like modern blues music with an electric guitar. It seems like it would be more something like metal or something like that. I'm not sure. Forgive my interest. But he's like, wailing away on his guitar. And I'm like, oh, this is why? And it gets worse because then we continue to like pan or move the camera around, and we see more visions of the future and the past, including, I don't know how else to say this, but like African tribesmen playing away on the drums during this blues sequence. And then we've got a guy at turntables, and I swear this happens in the background. You can hear them going, DJ Preacher Boy. And then there's like hip hop synth beats going on at the same time. And then we see the one Asian character pass in front of the camera. And then we've got like a dancer in, like, again, I apologize for my cultural ignorance, but traditional Asian garb. I don't know. I know that sounds terrible to say it like that. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, she's got the face paint and like a traditional dress on, or of some sort. I assume like some sort of dance or performance dress. And she's dancing away. And I didn't notice if the music had turned to stereotypical Asian music or not during that point. But they're layering all of these different genres on top of each other. And I like a good mashup. It's one of my favorite things to do on YouTube is to find like mashups of two different songs. And it can be very fun to see how two entirely different forms, or seemingly entirely different forms of music, smashed together create a new third thing. That is not happening here. Each of these musical layers clashes horribly. It does not sound good. Specifically, whatever, I don't think any of them really work together, but the one that stuck out to me very specifically was, there's probably a specific name for that kind of synth hip hop thing. I want to say it's like a specifically like 90s hip hop kind of a thing, but I'm not informed enough on, I don't listen to enough hip hop to say for sure. But that next to the blues, it's not working. Those two, maybe there's a hip hop and a blues song that you can mix together and it'll sound fine. Whatever they picked, not working whatsoever. It sounded atrocious. It really just sounded like two different people listening to their own music on speaker, and they were in near proximity. It does not mesh. It sounds terrible. And like, I don't know why they're bothering with this, like, seeing into the future or past nonsense. It doesn't, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there is more of a musical through line or like family tree that goes from blues to hip hop, because again, that's just not an area of music that I'm super familiar with. And maybe there really is like blues influenced X, which influenced Y, which influenced hip hop. And in which case they're trying to do like a musical through line and evolution thing and playing them all at once. But what I would say to that is, Blues also influenced rock, which influenced metal, but that doesn't mean that you can play B.B. King and Slayer on top of each other and expect it to sound good. So I don't know if they're trying to do like a specific music evolution thing. I suspect that they're actually trying to do more of like black experience thing, where it's like, and this feels awkward to say because it's like, this is why it's kind of cringe. It's like, hey, look at all these different forms of black music and we'll put them all together. And it's like, okay, but they're very different forms of music. I understand that the predominant race of the performers is the same, but does no one else, this is the last I'm going to say about this, but does no one else find that cringe to be like, hey, black people did this music and black people did this music, so let's put them together? Does that not sound cringe to anyone else? Okay, so their rant done about that scene. Let's now talk about what they're trying to say with it. Again, they might be trying to say something about some sort of intergenerational connection, and my question is, how does this affect the rest of the movie? The efficiency principle. I have no idea. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say it doesn't. This is another scene that you could cut. This is a self-indulgent scene, I think. Someone thought this was a really cool vision. Obviously, I disagree. And so they put it into the movie, and it doesn't matter. This scene does not affect anything except insofar as this is the scene that somehow attracts the vampires to them. Why does it attract the vampires to them? Again, no idea. So, if we apply the skateboard test to this movie, what if we cut that scene? Well, Evan, that would be a terrible idea, because then why would the vampires show up to this gathering of humans in the middle of nowhere at night? Oh, shit, I just answered my own question, didn't I? You literally could just have the vampires show up because they're like, hey, seems like a bunch of tasty humans in a tight, confined space. This sure does look like some good hunting. That's all you needed to do. This is why I have a particular loathing for this movie, because every time it tries to do something, whether I like it or not, whether or not I like what they are trying to do, every time they try to do something, it is irrelevant to the overall plot. This movie has no idea how to leverage anything that it does. One last point about the music here. You might be asking something like, well, why do they have to say something about the music? Does this movie really need to have a big thesis statement about the music? And the answer is no, you don't. You don't need to do anything grand and dramatic with music. There's a couple of ways that you could go. You could just have this be a horror movie that happens to have a lot of good blues music in it. That's fine. You don't need to explain or justify that. However, you started the movie with Preacher Boy walking into his dad's church and his dad saying, "Put the guitar down, son." This is a clear and unambiguous signal to the audience that there is going to be some sort of dramatic potency to the idea of to play or not to play, to put it simply. You can't put that scene at the beginning of the movie and then do nothing with it. So again, snip, snip. You could just cut that scene out. Of course, then you have the problem of, a half hour of no dramatic tension and the audience literally having no idea of where this is going to go. But, you could also just try to write that first half hour better, but, Anyway, so if you just want to have like the music as part of the aesthetic of the movie and nothing more, that's totally cool. But then you can't frame it the way that you did. If you do want to have so then you either have to say something about music, and I don't know if they were trying to be frank, in the first place, because I highly doubt. Let me put it this way: I don't know why this movie's called Sinners. Like, people do technically sin. There's a surprising amount of infidelity in this movie. I guess it's only 2 instances, but it's both romantic relationships that oh, no, I'm sorry, I lie. There's 3 romantic relationships. 2 of them are forms of infidelity. So I guess there you go. There's some sinning. You also have a lot of drinking in the movie. But It's so weird to me to think, like, I just don't believe that this movie really is saying that's the sinning that's going on. Because I'm sorry, I don't believe anyone in Hollywood is sitting there going, you know what's awful? Uh, Drugs, sex, and rock and roll. Or in this case, booze, sex, and the blues. Like, those are the great evils, apparently. If there's any sinning in this movie, that's what it is. Okay. I don't believe anyone in Hollywood has that conviction, and they don't actually seem to portray it that way in the movie either. There is not a lot in this movie to suggest that these are the true sinful activities. And so, to bring it back to the blues, I'm like, why? Why does his father think that it's evil? Like, I'm sure someone did in the past, but as a modern day audience member, you're gonna have to give me something. What is it about the music that this is like a minor subplot in the movie where it's like, Dad doesn't want me to go play the blues. Okay, why? Why? Please give me something to hold on to here. Obviously, I'm going to be on your side and be like, oh, it's just music. Except it also winds up being the thing that attracts the vampires. So hold on a second. What are you trying to tell me about music? Because presumably, my default gut reaction would obviously be there's nothing wrong with playing music. It might be a dubious career choice, but obviously there's nothing inherently wrong with playing the blues. That's ridiculous. Oh, it summoned vampires. Wait a minute. Huh? Now, I guess in this world, I have to change my opinion. I guess in this world, I would say, actually, there is something wrong with playing the blues. Are you trying to bring in a vampire attack? But then on the other hand, they have the cringe scene where they're trying to do some sort of like intergenerational community thing, which obviously this movie is going to think is a good thing. So then, is it good or bad? And the best thing that you can conclude is that music is just generically supernatural. Okay, that's also fine. We can go that route too. But then would you care to make that a little more relevant to the plot? Like, I feel like if I told most people how this movie goes, like, oh, he's like has a special spiritual connection to the music, and so when he starts playing, the vampires are attracted to it, and they go, oh yeah, and so he's obviously going to have to like do some music thing to somehow get rid of them, right? Like either maybe he'll play again and get some advice from some ancestor who had fought vampires too, and he'll tell them how to like defeat the vampires, or somehow he'll play so good that it splits the vampires' skulls open or something like that. And I'd be like, I am down for that. I am down. It's cheesy, but I am 100% down for that. You can go that route and I will be on board 100%. Let's go. Let's defeat vampires through the power of the blues. I'm on board. I cannot tell you how much I would have liked it if this movie did it. It doesn't. After the vampires arrive, music will no longer be relevant in any supernatural sense whatsoever. So what was the point? As I said, yet another thing that could be cut out of the movie and it would make it more efficient. And yet, it seems to be one of those things the movie cares about. Characters and music. The two best things that I have to say about this movie, granted, how the music is implemented is not one of the best things, but both of them irrelevant to the overall plot. I'm almost tempted to say, I don't know what happened here. I'm almost tempted to say like the vampire attack was tacked on, except it's the entire dramatic impetus of the movie. And so it's like, did you not want to make a horror movie? Did you actually care more about these other things and just had to slap it onto a horror movie instead? Or did you just not know how to write, a good horror movie? Because now, let's talk about what is genuinely the worst part about the movie, and that is the vampires. Oh my god, worst vampires ever. Or at least I would say so if vampire media wasn't like filled with absolutely awful vampires. I say this as if I've watched a lot of vampire media. I haven't, but it all seems so cringe, which is very disappointing to me. because I like the concept of vampires, at least a particular interpretation of vampires. For me, the compelling aspect of vampires is that they appear entirely human, but are actually complete evil monsters, but they can manipulate you. I love me some dramatic irony in vampires, where the audience knows someone's a vampire, or maybe only one character knows they're a vampire, but you can't convince anyone else, and the vampire is slowly wrapping everyone around their finger. Kind of like Fright Night, actually. Though that's not my favorite thing. But I understand not everyone's going to have that interpretation of vampires. Every single vampire work has a different interpretation of vampires, and that's fine. I'm not complaining that this movie doesn't do vampires the way that I want them to. I'm complaining that it's bad and it doesn't know. It's bad at what it is doing, and also I don't think it knows what it wants to do with vampires. So, first of all, this movie does stray a little bit into what I should like, because again, the goal is get into the juke joint, which is going to involve some manipulation. It's a shame that these vampires are complete morons. So you've got 3 white vampires that want to get into this black gathering here. That is the goal. That is the setup. And by the way, no one knows that vampires exist just yet. Also, as we will later learn, these vampires all seem to share thoughts, or at least memories. No, they share more than just memories, because I'll get this inconsistency out of the way real quick. For most of the movie, if one vampire gets injured, it doesn't affect anyone else. However, at the end of the movie, when our main villain has Preacher Boy at his mercy, and of course starts monologuing because, God forbid, we do what we came here to do and take the musical guy and turn him into a vampire, like was plan A, when you literally have him in your hands, let's sit for 2 straight minutes monologuing at him, because it's scary, guys, because we want the audience to be at the edge of their seat, because we want them to say, oh no, don't get him for 2 whole minutes. We couldn't do that and have intelligent characters, could we? No, we have to make our vampires brain dead, despite sharing brains, apparently. This is the epitome of they are sharing a single brain cell. Anyway, the point that I was going to make is during that scene, when the vampire gets hit, all the vampires seem to share pain. And yet, previously, we had seen a vampire get Molotov cocktailed. He was engulfed in flame, and the rest of the vampires didn't care. Oh, but Evan, it's different because it's the original vampire that gets hurt, and that's why everyone else recoils in pain. So it's only when you hurt the main vampire that all the other vampires get hurt. No, and I'll tell you why not. Because this movie takes pains to tell you, some vampire myths will say if you kill the person that turned you into a vampire, you will then turn back into a human. And this movie takes pains to look you in the eye and say, that's not how this works. You cannot kill the original vampire and save everyone else and turn them human again. Technically, that is not an explicit contradiction of the idea if you hurt the original vampire, all the others get hurt. But give me a break. You have to spell that stuff out. If you are going to, unless you are going to very specifically tell the audience and delineate those 2 concepts, it is perfectly fair for the audience to assume that either what happens to the main vampire will affect everyone else, or what happens to the main vampire won't affect everyone else. If you're going to be ticky-tacky about this, you have to spell it out. This is, again, one of those things where it's storytelling is applied psychology. You have to be able to anticipate what a reasonable conclusion is going to be from an audience member based on what you are telling them. And if they come to a different conclusion and it is reasonable based on what you have shown them, even if it is technically not 100% a correct deduction, it's on you as the storyteller that they got that impression. Part of storytelling is impression management. If not, that's a huge part of storytelling, actually. So if you're going to specifically tell me that, hey, treating the main vampire in one way, killing him, doesn't affect the other vampires in a similar way, curing them, then I'm naturally going to assume that there is nothing special about the original vampire. And yet, later on, again, as I said, they hurt him and everyone reacts as if, oh no, we've also been hurt. So, point A for how they don't know how to handle these vampires is that they establish, yes, they have like a communal mind, but also kind of not, but also kind of yes, and no, I will not clarify. That's the filmmaker speaking there, by the way, not just Evan. I can't tell you how it works because Ryan Coogler didn't tell me how it works. So, anyway, moving on, we have... I was going to say the plan. Really easy. So, we've got... your main problem as these three vampires is that you're white and everyone in there is black. And, you can't imagine that just walking up to them and being like, hey, could you let us into the party would possibly work. That would be a really stupid thing to do. That's what they do. Here's how you should have done this. And this takes like 2 seconds of thought, by the way. Again, it's one of these things that movies are ruined to me when I can take 2 seconds to figure out how a villain can do things better. Here's my plan here. Let me take these vampires to school. Real simple. You got 3 on your side. Here's how you do things. You put one person hiding out with a line of sight to the front door. You put vampire number 2 with line of sight hiding at the back door. You take vampire number 3 and you send them into town. What's vampire number 3 doing? Well, real simple. They're looking for anyone in the community who might not have been invited to this party, and they're going to turn them into a vampire so that they can then come up to the joint and be like, hey, I've got some money here. Will you let me in and join the party? Meanwhile, vampires 1 and 2, who are watching either entrance/exit, are just going to wait for a very simple thing. They're going to wait for anyone to come out to pee. And then you take them, turn them into a vampire, and then they'll go back and be like, hey, will you let me back in? And of course, people will be like, sure, we'll let you back in. How do I know this will happen? Because it basically happens in the movie. The only reason that the guy wasn't let back in after going off to pee and being turned into a vampire was because by that point, people knew that there were vampires and were on the lookout for them. But if you go by my plan, not a single person will know anything about this. And you'll get in there, easy pickings. This is so simple. This is not a difficult problem for vampires to handle. And again, you could maybe get away with not doing that if vampires weren't actually the people that got turned into vampires. Some mythos will say that when you get turned into a vampire, you don't actually get turned into a vampire. Like a demon or something replaces your soul and they're walking around in your body. But this movie, again, will explicitly tell you that's not what happened, and then will explicitly tell you that the vampires know everything that you knew. You are the vampire. When you get turned into a vampire, it's you. Now, we'll come back to this because, granted, you act like a stupidly, cartoonishly evil version of yourself, but they explicitly say it is your soul twisted by, and I swear this is a quote, the hate of this world, which is apparently instantaneous. I don't know what it is about being turned into a vampire that suddenly makes your soul susceptible to the hate in the world, whereas if you're a normal human, it doesn't. But apparently that's a thing. I guess being turned into a vampire lowers your hate psychic defenses or something. Anyway, my point is, you know how to act like a human. In fact, every vampire knows what every other vampire knows. So, you would obviously know that it's a stupid idea to just come out front and go, hey, we're musicians too. Will you let us into your party? And that's what they do. And then, of course, everyone says, no, that's weird. Go away. And so then they just awkwardly hang out until a dumb plot beat happens. We'll get to that in a second, because I want to back up for a moment and talk about the stupid introduction to vampires in the first place. Because I already have gone on at length about the half hour to an hour of this movie that's setting up characters. At a random point during that, the latter part of that, like the very end of that, the sun is going down. It is out. The sun is out, but going down. And we abruptly cut to a different scene where what we will learn is our original vampire is there, shirtless, and his skin is smoking. Pause. We have problems. We are going to shortly learn that he was being pursued by about 4 or more Native Americans on horseback who know what vampires are. They're vampire hunters. So, we have a vampire, shirtless, in the middle of a field with the sun out, being pursued by 4 vampire hunters, and he gets away. Mr. Coogler, how did this happen? Please tell me any plausible scenario in which this happened. Because I'm struggling really hard to figure this out. And this movie is one where sunlight will kill the vampires because it kills him in the finale. So again, the brilliant writing of this movie, introduce main villain in sun, does not die. Fast forward to the end, main villain is in sun, does die. Oh, but Evan, he's been injured and staked through the heart at the end of the movie. I don't care, it's bad optics either way you do it, and it's just a stupid way to introduce the villain. They introduce him like shortly before the sun goes down. Why not just wait until the sun's already down to introduce him? You've just thrown in plot holes for no reason here. Anyway, the other 2 vampires wind up, he turns 2 other white people. Turns out the husband is a Klansman, and his wife, they both get turned into vampires because he stumbles on their shed and is like, please let me in. I'm being chased by the, quote, Injuns, end quote. And yeah, so they let him in. He turns them into vampires. The Native Americans are like trying to be like, hey, you don't know who's inside there. That's actually a monster. And what I don't understand, and maybe people will fight me on this, the vampire hunters leave. I'm not sure why. So again, there's 4 of them. They've come to this like crappy shack in the middle of a field that cannot have more than a few people inside, unless my memory's playing tricks on me and it's larger than I thought. My thoughts as the vampire hunters would be, okay, we're pretty sure the vampire is inside there. He's probably going to turn a couple of these people into vampires, which is bad. Now, we've got a couple of options. Option A is we stick around to finish him off. Now, there's a couple of downsides. Downside 1, he's going to get reinforcements. Probably not that many, because there can't be too many that live in this house. Also, the sun is setting, so it's going to be night, and he's not going to be being burned by the sun. Now, on the other hand, he seemed to be running away just fine while the sun was out, so it can't be that big of a buff when the sun comes down, or goes down. But maybe you think that option A sounds kind of bad. So obviously, then, the alternative would be option B, which is we leave and go back home. Have you considered that option B is actually terribly stupid? So you're going to leave the vampire at night where you know he is, and you're going to give him all night to go turn more people into vampires, which he does, by the way. There's like 20 to 30 vampires by the end of this. And you're going to hope that they don't come back looking for you. Again, if the vampires weren't so stupid in this movie, what they would do is he'd be like, oh, the main vampire would go, oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to create a whole posse of vampires. I'm going to create an army of vampires. I'm going to find people. I'm going to find those hunters who know who I am, and I'm going to get at them too. Oh, but they're vampire hunters, so they wouldn't let him in. Again, there's ways to get around that. It might be hard, but when I can spawn other vampires, like with a single bite, buddy, it's going to be retribution o'clock here in a moment. You hunted me and my kind down, we're coming back for you. But again, these guys, these vampire hunters don't show up again in the movie. They leave. They're out of the movie. Can you guess what my critique is going to be? It might involve some scissors. Yes, yet again, we have another scene that would improve the movie if it was removed. This time is the first time that I can say it's a strict improvement, because not only is this, maybe the second time, but this is a time where I can say would be a strict improvement, because not only is the scene itself dumb and bad, but it is unnecessary too. If the vampires just showed up outside the juke joint, you don't need to explain this. Hey, we heard rumor that there is going to be a party out here where many humans will be, and we sure do like drinking the blood of humans. You don't need to explain that. You've added a stupid scene to explain something that doesn't need to be explained. Well, we need to know how the first vampire gets more. No, we don't. We didn't explain where the first vampire came from, unless I missed that dialogue somewhere, but you don't need to do that. It's perfectly fine to say, hey, this vampire exists. You actually don't need to give an origin to everything. I wish more writers in Hollywood these days would understand this. Not everything needs an origin. You can just say, hey, the premise of this movie is that there's vampires, so there's vampires. That's fine. You don't need to do more work than that, because apparently you're incompetent at explaining things. So, not only do we have a stupid introduction to these vampires, they have a stupid plan. They've arrived for stupid reasons, and all they need to do is get someone inside. Because as we will see many times throughout this movie, these are the type of vampires that are basically immune to bullets. Oh, we have that classic line where they're like, we can't kill them with these, but at least we can slow them down. And by slow them down, let me be clear, it's like you can make them flinch. So it's not... You're not like blowing limbs off and then they need to like regrow before they do anything. It's like, no, you shot me. Ow, that was a mild, and it's over. And I'm done, and I'm ready, and I'm going to kill you again. So if you get any vampires inside this place, it's basically game over. So it will surprise you not at this point, I would hope, that the vampires waste not one, but two opportunities when they get inside there. Twice there are vampires that get inside the place, and instead of doing the smart thing, which is it's feeding time and biting everyone that they can get their filthy hands on, they leave. They have accomplished the one goal, getting inside, and when they're discovered, they leave. This is a good movie. So, let's discuss the stupid way and how this happens the first time. So, now, I don't know if you could have imagined this, but it turns out that opening up a business in a poor rural community means that your customer base is, drumroll, poor. However, it turns out that, surprising everyone, that is indeed the case. And in the first night of business, Smoke and Stack conclude immediately that this is unsustainable. They haven't made enough on their first night, and so it's all over. Okay. Not only that, I'm not even going to dwell on like that ridiculous leap in logic, but fine, whatever. It's fine. Maybe you can square that circle, whatever. I don't care. I'm more interested in the proposed solution. So I had mentioned before, there's the white lady who had a relationship or has a relationship with Stack. There's a ton of drama about it. It's, again, the fact that I can discuss this movie without bringing into detail it just goes to prove my point from before that the character stuff is irrelevant to this movie. But anyway, she has a brilliant idea because the weird, creepy white folk, the vampires, had already showed up previously and sure wanted in. And so her plan to save the business that specifically caters to the black community is to go and see if they have any money and if they want to come in. What? I don't know where to begin with how dumb this is. Is it the fact that I would imagine that a black community in the 1930s is probably not too thrilled to have a bunch of random white folks running around in there. They'll probably kind of, ruin the vibe a little bit. But why do you think they have enough money to save the business? To be clear, they do not look rich. And they aren't rich, because we saw where the two people that got turned into a vampire are from. They shouldn't have much money either. Why would you think that they have enough to save the business? And don't tell me it's because they're white. There's plenty of poor white folks at that time, too. That's kind of one of the instigating factors of a lot of the racism that was there at the time. Because a lot of white folk were like, the only, literally race is the only thing that distinguishes us class-wise from the black folk. So, you're just as poor. That's why you're kind of racist, to try to, give yourself a better status. So don't tell me, oh, they're white, they must be rich. You know better than that. So, but for some reason, I say for some reason, the reason is because plot. And because we made the vampires so stupid before this, we have to find some contrived reason to get a vampire into the joint. So white lady goes out to try and figure out if they have any money. She gets turned into a vampire, and then of course she's friends of the black community, to put it simple. I'm not going to get into it because it's not worth it. She gets let back in, of course, because she was already inside. And so it's game over, right? We got a vampire inside. In fact, not only do we have a vampire inside, but she seduces Stack and then bites him. So we've got two vampires inside. Game over. Movie's ended. Everyone dies, right? Well, I already told you, no. She gets discovered. And again, as I already told you, instead of biting everyone in sight and just, ending things even quicker, she runs out the front door. Okay. That leaves Stack, who's apparently dead. Quiz time, everyone. You are Stack. You are a vampire. You know that you're a vampire. You know what the rest of your vampire friends' goals are, which is to, depending on which scene we're in, get as many of the people inside as we can, or get Preacher Boy specifically. You wake up in I guess it's kind of not a closet, but a side room off of the main room. Now, you might think that is going to be a problem because you have to be invited into the main room. Nope. It's just that you do not have to be invited through this door. We will see that this door, there's no mystical barrier for this door. If you want to and are physically capable of doing so, you can get through this door. So got to be clear about that firsthand. But you wake up in the side room. There's no one else there. You can hear everyone else in the main room. And I already told you your goals. What do you do? Take a moment. Think about it. Plot your moves carefully. All right. Whatever you said, you're thinking too small. All right. Here's what you actually do. I'm going to lay out to you the 300 IQ move here. All right. You're going to make some noise when you wake up. You can't really do much else about that. You can't help that. So someone's gonna come and they're gonna kind of try to do the eye through the keyhole thing and see what's going on. You wait till that exact moment where their eye is real close to the door, and then it's very important. Follow me here. You take your knife and you stab it through the door, almost stabbing them in the eye. Now you're not going to actually stab them in the eye, but you're going to get close. See, I told you, very, very brilliant move here. Now, this is a 3-step plan. All right, so that's step 1, okay? Follow me here. Step 2, you then try to convince everyone that you're actually just fine, you're still the same old Stack, and that they should let you in. Now, you might be asking a couple of questions, like, why was it necessary to stab my knife very uncharacteristically through the door for no reason whatsoever? Because first off, you're not going to hit anyone. And second off, if you do hit someone, that's kind of counterproductive because you want to turn them into a vampire, not kill them. And after I do that, why would I do that before trying to convince everyone that I'm just fine? And also, why am I trying to convince everyone that I'm just fine instead of just, walking into the room and saying I'm just fine? Why am I acting like I need them to open the door when I don't need them to open the door? And instead acting like the creepy people that wanted to get invited in. Why am I doing all of that? And look, if you haven't caught on already to why this is a brilliant play, I can't explain it for you. But you definitely have to do it this way. It's very important. Knife, then convince. And by convince, I mean try to be as suspicious and out of character as you possibly can. Now, I know that you're exactly the same stack except somehow evil, but I need you to sound really creepy when you're doing this. You need to be very unpersuasive while trying to sound persuasive. It's very important. Saying things like, "Oh no, I'm not dead. Definitely not. I'm feeling much better, actually." Definitely don't try to play it off like, I don't know, "Oh my God, I'm injured. Please come help me." "Wait, we thought we were dead. We didn't feel a pulse." "Well, does it sound like I'm alive? Get the hell in here. It hurts like hell." No, don't do anything like that. Definitely try to play it off. Then step 3, very important. This is the most important part of the plan. It's kind of step 3 and 4, I should say, but it's going to happen so quick that we're kind of combining them into step 3. Step 3 is break down the door, because yes, you could break down the door the entire time, and then immediately run outside. Okay? Got that? Everyone got that? I hope you have all taken very careful notes in vampirism. Yes, you, in the back of the class. What's that? Try to persuade them that you're just fine and then bite them. That's stupid. Get out. Detention. You. Yes, you. You think that you can come up with a better plan? Just straight up attack them, break down the door when they're not suspecting, and bite everyone in sight. Get out. You're an embarrassment to vampire kind. How dare you suggest such incompetence? God, who am I dealing with here? No one understands subtlety. All right, the facetious part is over. I cannot stand how stupid these vampires are, and they will continue to be this way. We have to talk about how cartoonishly evil they are. There's another point, again, another brilliant 300 IQ play move here by the vampires. There's a point where I mentioned there's like an Asian couple in here, and the husband winds up getting sent out at one point and turned into a vampire, as you do. It was kind of before they all realized that there were vampires happening here. So that's before we critique them for being dumb. It wasn't necessarily dumb at the time. But anyway, he comes out. He's been turned into a vampire. He's coming back. And he comes up and he's like, everyone else, all the good guys are inside the door to the place because, again, that's the safe thing to do. And so he comes walking up and he's like, "All right, honey, let's get our stuff and go. Or, hey, if we still got some stuff in there, I can come in and help grab some stuff." And compared to what I was just saying, that might sound like actually a pretty slick thing to do. And I would agree. On its own, that's pretty fine. Again, they're pretty suspicious at this point, so it's a pretty mid-tier play, all things considered. But, not bad. Except for one small detail, and that would be the vampire attack that's happening 2 feet away that he isn't reacting to. There is literally a vampire, like, ripping the throat out of a human being, like 2 feet from them, and he is not acknowledging its existence. And as soon as he's called out on that, he's basically like, "Oh, that's nothing." Really, man? Really? At this point, I have to assume that the director thinks that people acting strange or off-putting is scary. And this seems to be a common delusion among horror directors. That, hey, it doesn't matter if we make our villains look completely moronic. All that matters is that they wouldn't be scary if they were competent. If they just did like what you were suggesting, Evan, going, that wouldn't be scary. They got to do weird, creepy things. Like, you wanted them to just, like, at the beginning, like, just post up in ambush outside of the joint? No. How is that scary? It's scarier when they come up and act creepy and go, can we please be let inside? That's scary. It's scary when people act weird. This is what I mean when I say there are no standards for horror movies. We couldn't possibly have a movie that is scary about who is or isn't the monster, where both the villains and the protagonists act intelligently as slowly the state of play changes surreptitiously, and only occasionally when the monster is revealed do we have a terrifying explosion of gore and violence, and oh wait, the Thing exists. Why can't you just do The Thing with vampires? And this time I'm going to say no, it's not an unfair comparison, because they do The Thing with vampires in this movie. There is a point, there's a scene in this movie where after they realize that there's vampires, they find a dead guy on the ground and they go, oh no, there's a vampire that's already inside here. So just like how in The Thing they do the blood tests, in this case, their version of that is you have to eat garlic. And so everyone has to eat garlic, and there's, of course, a couple of fake outs just for dramatic tension. Like, one lady there is like, but I really hate garlic. And it's like, thankfully, the other characters do tell her to shut up because of this. Because it's like, really? You're going to do this now? Like, oh, it tastes bad. Hey, we think you're a vampire, and we will kill you to protect ourselves. Because, by the way, we're totally justified in doing that. Because if you do not prove that you're human, we have to protect ourselves. You can prove you're human very simply. Eat this garlic. Oh, but it tastes bad. I hate you. I hate you so much. And then they do another one where another person like starts choking on the garlic or something like that. And it's like, oh my God, is he a vampire? Is he not? No, he's not. It's a fake out. It's this really dumb, lame fake out shit. So, but get ready because I forgot to tell you something. When they found the dead guy, because, you know, when you get bitten and you get killed by a vampire, apparently, they seem to imply that you have to get killed by a vampire, but frankly, there's not enough blood to suggest that you, like, bled out if a vampire got you. So I guess they're drinking it, so maybe the rule is that you have to get killed by a vampire, but to be honest, I don't believe them. I'm not convinced by how they do that. Anyway, so they find the guy killed by the vampire, and so, of course, they throw the body out. Because if he wakes up in there, he'll kill them all. So funny story. He's not dead. Yeah. By the way, we've already established that these people know to feel for a pulse, and they know vampires don't have a pulse. They threw out the living guy. How did they do that? Well, the pool of blood lying next to him, it wasn't blood. It was beer. It was spilled beer from a broken bottle, and they didn't know that, so they threw him outside. So you remember that human getting mauled like 2 feet away when the Asian husband comes back? That was him. They killed that guy out of sheer stupidity, which rarely for a horror movie, I don't have too many complaints about the human's intelligence on that, except for this scene, which is so glaringly obvious. Up until this point, they weren't being that dumb. They were being like really resistant to let anyone in. Now, granted, that was really easy because the vampires were acting like complete dumbasses. So it was not difficult to be like, hey, you're acting... The bar was very low to not be stupid in this movie. And they flubbed it. So let's talk a little bit, two last things about the vampires. What are they trying to do with vampires? Like, what's the vibe that I'm supposed to get from them? Because this movie cannot decide. As I've said, it should be that they're trying to do an infiltration kind of a thing. And sometimes the movie toys with that, but then it has them act cartoonishly evil. But it explicitly says that they're the same person, just twisted around. But they're cartoonishly evil. So frankly, that can't be true. Or if it's true in a metaphysical sense, then they're so corrupted that they might as well not be the same person. Except there's a mid-credits scene. After this movie is over, we flash forward to the 90s, where Preacher Boy is being a famous blues guitarist, and he's at a bar, and a couple of people come in to see him after a show. And it's Stack and the White Lady, who are still alive, and they're vampires. And I don't even know where to begin. So you might say, oh, so they're here to kill him, and they're not. And then your immediate follow-up question might be, wait a minute, why didn't they kill him in the 60 years since they got turned into a vampire? Or vampires? And I'll tell you, it's because in the final fight of this movie, Smoke, Stack's twin, had Stack the vampire dead to rights. Like he had a stake, Stack was on the ground, he was about to stab him in the heart. We had cut away previously, so we didn't see what actually happened, but Smoke comes out of the building. So the implication is, oh, he killed Stack, obviously. Well, as we now know from the mid-credit scene, he did not. And what we find out is in what must have been the split second between there, that the reason Stack and the White Lady have not come and killed Preacher Boy, the entire reason that they were there in the first place to kill Preacher Boy, was because Smoke made Stack promise not to. I'm going to try to recreate the moment that I told this to someone else, to one of my buddies. Because when I told this to one of my buddies, he goes, but he's a vampire. No, but he promised. But he's a vampire. No, he promised. He promised his twin brother, but he's a vampire. No, it's a promise. By the way, there is no indication elsewhere in this movie that vampires are obligated to keep their word or anything like that. Now, keep in mind, these vampires have been cartoonishly evil up to this point. So, obviously, when the vampire's about to die, he makes a promise and then totally intends to keep it. Definitely not go back on his word moments later. That would be ridiculous. No, vampires aren't, I don't know, monstrously, cartoonishly evil creatures that are incredibly unsubtle about how vile and awful they are. No, they're actually just the exact same dudes, because fast forward to the 90s, he's still not going to kill Preacher Boy. In fact, they're there to reminisce like old friends. And they act like they're just completely normal people, except that two of them haven't aged for 60 years. And they just catch up and chat. And we even have like an almost sympathetic beat for Stack, where Preacher Boy asks, hey, before the sun went down, that was the best day of my life. Was it like that for you too? And Stack has like this moment where he's like, yeah, it was. It was the last day that I saw the sun. And I'm like, you're a vicious, evil creature that helped slaughter a ton of people that night. Why are we supposed to be like, have this sympathetic, touching moment now? You were not, when you woke up in the side room, you were not doing this, it's just the same old me Stack thing. Like, actually, you were doing the bad cartoon, I'm an evil monster that's replaced Stack routine. This is what I mean when I say the movie doesn't know what it wants to do with vampires. Are they sympathetic? Are they evil? Are they sympathetic but slowly get turned to the way of evil? Are they a hive mind or not? To what degree are they a hive mind? Are they actually evil? Kind of already covered that. What is their draw to music? Again, already kind of covered that. I don't know why vampires are the main antagonist of this movie. Otherwise, and you don't need like a big reason. But again, the reason I focus on like what is the symbolic purpose of the vampire in this movie is because at times this movie acts like it has something to say, as I've gone over before. And then when you actually look at it, it's like, no, this is actually just a bad horror movie that's a vampire standoff. This is a bad vampire standoff movie. That's what it is. That's what it actually is. You might be distracted because it initially had good characters, or that it has like an emphasis on a blues music and stuff. But nope, it's just another bad horror movie. The actual plot of it is atrocious. No one is intelligent. No one is... The main characters aren't always stupid, but the villains are definitely not intelligent. And here's my second point about vampires, and another controversial take that I'm going to have probably is I'm starting to get to the point where I'm like, bring censorship back. And what I mean by that is these vampires, like as soon as they start drinking blood, they're just like covered in blood. And again, this is another one of those moments where it's like, I feel like the director's going, isn't that scary? Look how unnatural they are. They're all covered in blood and guts and ooh, scary, isn't it? And I'm like, no, not really. I'm kind of distracted, to be honest, because I'm like the white lady who had like a silver dress on and it's turned completely red because there's blood all down her front and it's still like all around her mouth and stuff. I'm like, do you not want to wipe that off? Like, no, I get it. Blood is tasty and you want to drink it and you might be a messy eater and whatnot. But like, I like chocolate, but I'm not going to smear it across my face and just leave it there. Do you not, do vampires, are they like, I don't know what the word for not feeling anything? Like literally they have no sensation of touch. Doesn't it not get sticky and crusty? Is it not uncomfortable to just have all of that blood spattered on you? Like you think you're being edgy and gross, but you're really not. And it actually kind of undercuts everything because it gets silly. It's kind of funny because I'm looking at all these vampires doused in blood and I'm like, this is just stupid. This isn't scary. This is stupid. Subtlety and restraint go a long way. And I'm not the guy that will always rail on about subtlety. I'm not. But it's one of those cases where it's just too much. And I'm fine with there being gore per se, but it's like so many people don't seem to have, again, any restraint or any artistry to it. Let me make a couple of analogies. It's like, oh, Evan, you're saying that there shouldn't be any gore. No, I'm not. But I am saying that, for example, by way of analogy, lighting. Let's say if every one of your shots is lit up with like a billion spotlights, like it looks like sitcom lighting where everything is just as bright as you possibly can, no matter what the scene, then you know what? I'm going to start to think maybe we should take away like all but two of your lights and be like, you get two. See what you can do with it. Or CGI. It's like I don't have an in principle condemnation or aversion to CGI. But when everything is CGI and it looks terrible, it's like maybe you should have gone with the original Jurassic Park approach. You know, maybe we should actually say you get 30 seconds of CGI in this film. Figure out what you want to do with it. Figure out where you're not going to use CGI, but you get 30 seconds. Use it well. You've gotten spoiled. I'm taking it away. That's what I feel like with blood and guts in a lot of movies. I kind of felt the same way about Nosferatu, to be honest, where it's like the fact that you have the freedom to just show whatever you want in an R-rated movie, I think means some of you... Restrictions are often breed creativity and better artistic results. Some of you need to be restrained. In contrast, I would point to a movie like Day of the Dead. Day of the Dead is like one of my favorite movies, and it's very gory at points. This is the key, though. It's only at points. There's actually not a lot of like crazy zombie action in the movie. When it happens, it happens. But up until then, the situation is fairly controlled and it's a lot of dread. I can barely look at some of the gory scenes in that movie. Like, it's so much. Like, there's the scene in the laboratory where the guy's experimenting on the zombies, and it's like, ugh. It's very well done technically, and it's very difficult to look at. And part of what makes it great is that not every single zombie has their entrails spilling out. It's by only doing it occasionally, it's even more impactful. Granted, the effects in that movie I think would be impactful no matter what, but it's helped a lot by the fact that there are few and far between scenes like that. But no, we got to make them scary. So that means drenching them in blood and acting overtly evil, because that's scary, people. We couldn't do anything where, things are creepy and the situation is unnerving. Maybe you feel helpless in the scenario and it slowly builds. Like, I don't know, The Exorcist. That's another good movie. Hey, guys, this is what I'm trying to say. You realize there can be good movies that are also horror movies. It shouldn't be this difficult. I've just named 3 of them very intentionally in this review: The Exorcist, The Thing, and Day of the Dead. I know they're absolutely fantastic movies, but you don't even, if you did half of what those movies did, you would have done 4 times what this movie did. Why is this movie impressing people so much? I don't understand it. And I think I've said about everything that I need to at this point. There is more, actually, that I could say. I think there is still other stupid parts in the movie, but I've hit all of the main points that I think I need to. So just to recap, the villain's incredibly stupid, which to me, again, a smart villain is 10 times scarier than a stupid villain. But we've got stupid villains. We fail to leverage or to integrate most of the script, to the point where the worst stuff is the plot relevant stuff. The best stuff is plot irrelevant and therefore could be cut. It acts like it has something to say, but then has nothing to back it up with. What it does say seems to be contradictory to itself. An impressive accomplishment of terrible writing. And that's this movie. It's got good stuff in it for sure. And that makes it all the more infuriating. Sinners sucks, actually.